Here's a fact that should make you deeply uncomfortable. Right now, there are Americans living in towns so isolated that the nearest grocery store is a 4-hour drive. Towns where the ambulance response time is measured in days, not minutes. Towns where your neighbors aren't people. They're bears, blizzards, and the crushing cathedral silence of a landscape that does not care whether you live or die. And the wildest part, they choose to be there. This isn't a list about poverty or failure. This is about the places America forgot, or maybe deliberately left behind, and the stubborn, sunburned, frostbitten souls who decided that civilization is overrated anyway. Some of these towns have populations in the single digits. One has a population of exactly 1. And number one is going to make you question everything you think you know about why humans live where they live. Hit that like button if you're brave enough to see number 1. And subscribe, because trust me, you are absolutely not ready for where this is going. Number 12, Lost Springs, Wyoming. Population 4. Let's ease in gently. Lost Springs, Wyoming has a population of 4 people. 4. That's not a town, that's a carpool. You could fit the entire citizenry of Lost Springs into a standard pickup truck, with room left over for a golden retriever and a case of Coors Light. Sit with that for a second. 4 people. The average American high school homeroom has more kids in it than this entire municipality. Lost Springs sits in Converse County, Wyoming, roughly halfway between Casper and the concept of nowhere. It incorporated in 1911, peaked at a population of around 200 during a brief oil boom, and has been in steady existential decline ever since. By 1980, the census counted 4 residents. By 2000, famously, it counted 1. A woman named Leda Price was, for a brief moment in time, the sole resident, the entire population, and presumably both candidates in any local election she cared to hold. She won every vote. Unanimously. Landslide. Today, with 4 brave souls calling it home, Lost Springs has clawed its way back to almost inconsequential. There's a bar, because Wyoming, and what passes for a town hall. The bar doubles as everything else, including, probably, the cultural center, the civic forum, and the only viable dating pool, which is a situation with some obvious logistical problems. Here's the thing about Lost Springs that the internet keeps discovering. It's weirdly charming, not in a brochure way. This is a Norman Rockwell painting that's been left in the rain for 40 years, and somehow it still has a pulse kind of way. The people here aren't hiding. They're not eccentric survivalists. They just happen to have decided that 4 neighbors is precisely the right number of neighbors. No noise complaints, no traffic, no HOA newsletter passive-aggressively reminding you that your grass is 0.3 inches too tall. But if you think 4 people sounds isolated, the next town on this list has them beat by 3 whole human beings. Number 11, Monowi, Nebraska. Population 1. Elsie Eiler is the mayor of Monowi, Nebraska. She's also the town librarian, the bartender, the municipal clerk, the only registered voter, and the entire population. When Elsie needs to authorize a liquor license for her bar, she submits the application, approves the application, and signs off on it herself. American democracy, baby, working exactly as intended. Monowi, which sits about 25 miles from the South Dakota border in Boyd County, deep in the sandhills of northern Nebraska, had 150 residents at its peak in the 1930s. Then the railroads pulled out. Then the young people pulled out. Then, one by one, everyone else did too. Elsie's husband Rudy held on until 2004. Then it was just her. She's in her 80s now, still running the Monowi Tavern, and still maintaining the Rudy's Library she built in her late husband's honor, a small structure with over 5,000 books that Rudy collected over his lifetime. She keeps the lights on, files her own taxes. Population 1 makes that spreadsheet extremely manageable, and has been featured in more documentary films and travel journalism pieces than most actual celebrities. People ask her constantly, "Why don't you leave?" And she gives versions of the same answer. This is her home. These are her memories. Rudy is buried here. What would leaving even mean? There's no grocery store within comfortable range. The nearest hospital requires planning. Winter in Boyd County, Nebraska hits like something personal and vindictive. And yet, There's a defiant dignity in Elsie Eiler that makes you feel like maybe the rest of us are the ones who got it wrong, scrambling through traffic and quarterly reviews and HOA drama, mistaking noise for life. Monowai is a whole town with a population of 1, but honestly, it might have more soul per capita than any city in America. Population density in Monowai, unknowable. It's just Elsie and the wind. Number 10, Tortilla Flat, Arizona. Population. 6 Tortilla Flat is the kind of place that sounds like someone made it up for a Western film, then forgot to tear down the set. 6 permanent residents, 1 restaurant, 1 general store, 1 saloon with dollar bills stapled to every visible surface, approximately 100,000 of them, according to locals, which is either a deeply eccentric local tradition or the world's least efficient savings account. Located in the Superstition Mountains east of Phoenix, Tortilla Flat sits at the end of the Apache Trail, a winding, terrifying, partially unpaved road that the state of Arizona built in 1905 to haul supplies for the Roosevelt Dam. The road is now a scenic byway, which is real estate agent speak, for there are stretches where if your tire blows, the car goes off a cliff. It's beautiful. It is genuinely, breathtakingly beautiful. It's also genuinely, breathtakingly dangerous. The town gets something like 200,000 tourists a year, a ratio of 33,000 visitors per permanent resident that makes Tortilla Flat, per capita, probably the most visited place on this entire list. People come for the saguaro cactus, the Superstition Mountains, the novelty of eating chili in a room wallpapered with money. Then they drive back to Phoenix on roads that test their faith in their vehicle's alignment. The 6 people who actually live there are, by all accounts, a specific breed of human. They chose a lifestyle where their nearest neighbor might be a javelina, where summer temperatures regularly exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit, where the concept of popping out for milk involves a 40-minute commitment to pavement that can't decide if it's a road or a suggestion. Reddit's r/map porn posts about Tortilla Flat get thousands of upvotes and comments that all say roughly the same thing. Wait, this is real. It is real. 6 people live there on purpose. They are not confused. They are, by some definitions, enlightened. Number 9, Halfway, Oregon. Population, approximately 330. In 1999, a little .com company called Half.com was so desperate for publicity that they offered the tiny town of Halfway, Oregon. Population then around 350, $100,000 in cash, computers for every kid in the school, and stock options in exchange for officially renaming itself Half.com, Oregon, for 1 year. The town said yes. Obviously, the town said yes. These are practical people. The stunt worked spectacularly. Half.com got enormous media coverage. The town got $100,000, laptops, and a brief moment of national relevance. 6 months later, eBay bought Half.com for $300 million. The town of Half.com, Oregon quietly reverted to being Halfway, Oregon, and the internet moved on. Here's what the internet missed. Halfway is genuinely and legitimately isolated in ways that have nothing to do with brand deals. It sits in the Pine Valley of eastern Oregon, in the shadow of the Wallowa Mountains, 50 miles from Baker City, itself not exactly a metropolis, down a 2-lane road that closes in bad weather. The nearest commercial airport is a 4-hour drive. The winters are brutal. The economy has never fully recovered from the logging industry collapse of the 1980s and 90s. And people stay. A 2023 Zillow listing for a 3-bedroom home in Halfway, $189,000. Compare that to Portland's median home price of over $500,000, and suddenly, the isolation starts looking like a feature. The people who live in Halfway have access to some of the most extraordinary wilderness in the American West. Hell's Canyon, the Wallowas, rivers so clear they look photoshopped. They trade convenience for space, commute time for silence, and urban amenities for skies so dark you can see the Milky Way from your front porch. The .com deal was a blip. The mountains are forever. Number 8, Terlingua, Texas. Population, approximately 58, official, / approximately 200 if you count the stubborn ones. Terlingua is technically a ghost town. The Texas state government more or less agrees with this assessment. The US Census doesn't even bother giving it an official population. And yet, if you drive out to the Big Bend region of West Texas, which takes a commitment, because you're 4 hours from San Antonio on a good day, and the roads through the Chihuahuan Desert are not joking around, you'll find a growing, thriving, deeply weird community of people who chose a ghost town over a living city. The original Terlingua boomed on mercury mining in the late 1800s and early 1900s. When the mines played out, it died. The adobe buildings dissolved back into the desert. The company store caved in. The cemetery stayed, because cemeteries always stay. They're the most patient residents of any former town. Then, starting in the 1960s and accelerating through the 70s and 80s, people started coming back. Not many, but enough. Artists, retirees, people who had burned out on cities and wanted somewhere they could watch 400 miles of nothing without anyone selling them something. The Terlingua International Chili Championship, held annually since 1967 and now drawing thousands of visitors, put the ghost town back on the cultural map. Today's Terlingua has a bar, a general store, a few small inns, and an assortment of casitas and converted ruins that rent on Airbnb for surprisingly reasonable rates. The nearest grocery store is in Alpine, 80 miles away. The nearest trauma center is further. Self-service exists in an aspirational, optimistic sort of way. And summer temperatures regularly hit 115 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade, at which point the shade becomes a concept Terlingua treats with deep philosophical respect. There is no AC in many of the historic structures. There is, however, a view of the Chizos Mountains at sunset that looks like God commissioned it specifically to shut you up. People who live in Terlingua have a look in their eyes. Not crazy, not lost, just done. Number 7. Hyder, Alaska. Population, approximately 87. Here is a sentence that should not be geographically possible. Hyder, Alaska, is most easily accessed from Canada. Hyder sits at the very tip of the Portland Canal, a narrow fjord in the Alaska Panhandle, and its only road connection to the outside world runs directly through Stewart, British Columbia. To get to Hyder by car, you cross international border from Canada into Alaska, which makes Hyder the only American town where your commute involves customs paperwork. There is no road connecting Hyder to the rest of Alaska. None. The Alaska highway system does not touch it. You are, in a very literal sense, a piece of Alaska that Canada is holding hostage. Despite this geographic absurdity, Hyder calls itself the friendliest ghost town in Alaska, and the residents appear to genuinely mean it. The town peaked in the 1920s during a silver mining rush, dropped off sharply when the mines closed, and has maintained a population in the double or triple digits ever since, depending on the season. Hyder uses Canadian dollars more than American ones. It observes Pacific time like its Canadian neighbor, not Alaska time. It is, to a meaningful degree, a quietly, comfortably bicultural community that has decided international borders are more of a vibe than a hard rule. What draws people here, beyond obvious frontier romanticism, is the wildlife. The Salmon Glacier, one of the most accessible large glaciers in North America, is a 15-mile drive. The Fish Creek Wildlife Observation Site is famous worldwide for allowing humans to stand within literal feet of brown and black bears fishing for salmon. You're not in a zoo enclosure. And the bears are not behind glass. You're just there, and so are they. And you've all agreed, wordlessly, to behave. Hyder has no police department. It relies on the Royal Canadian Mounted Police from Stewart for law enforcement. America polices most of its territory. Hyder outsourced the job to Canada, and honestly, based on results, maybe that's worth a think. Number 6, Chicken, Alaska. Population, approximately 7, winter, approximately 30, summer. The town of Chicken, Alaska exists because the miners who founded it wanted to name it ptarmigan, after the local bird that sustained them through brutal winters. But nobody could agree on how to spell ptarmigan, so they named it Chicken instead. This is 100% true. The entire town of Chicken, Alaska was named Chicken because no one could operate a dictionary. Chicken sits on the Taylor Highway in interior Alaska, about 75 miles south of the Canadian border. It's on the road to Dawson City, Yukon, and I use the word road with the generosity of spirit that the Taylor Highway both requires and, frankly, does not deserve. Parts of it are unpaved, Parts of it are closed in winter, parts of it in spring, and all become a special kind of mud that treats vehicles as a personal insult. 7 people live in Chicken in winter. 7. The wind coming off the interior Alaska plateau doesn't care about their feelings. Temperatures routinely hit minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, at which point Fahrenheit and Celsius agree, because at minus 40, the universe has stopped being polite about it. In summer, a seasonal influx of miners, tourist outfitters, and people doing a loop of Alaskan highways bumps the population to around 30. There's a saloon, a cafe, a gift shop, and a post office. A U.S. post office, technically serving Chicken, Alaska, with a postmark that delights novelty mail enthusiasts worldwide. People send Christmas cards from Chicken, Alaska, every year specifically for the postmark. The post office earns more goodwill than almost any federal institution in the country, purely because of the word chicken in the address. Year-round residents of Chicken have made peace with silence in a way that most humans never have to confront. The nearest town of any size is Tok, 109 miles away. The gold dredge that operated here for decades has been preserved as an artifact. The landscape is raw taiga, spruce and birch and muskeg and rivers. Beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they don't need you to find them beautiful. Chicken, Alaska. You can't make this stuff up. You couldn't even spell it if you tried. Number 5, Supai, Arizona. Population, approximately 208. Imagine the year is 2024 and you need to receive a package. You order it online, let's say vitamins or a book or literally anything. Now, imagine that package is loaded onto a mule. The mule walks 8 miles down a canyon trail. Then it arrives. That is how Amazon delivers to Supai, Arizona. Supai is the capital of the Havasupai tribe and sits at the bottom of a side canyon of the Grand Canyon. It is the most remote community in the contiguous 48 states. There is no road. There is no way in or out that doesn't involve either your legs, a horse, a mule, or a helicopter. The U.S. Post Office, which by law delivers to every address in America, delivers to Supai via pack mule, making it literally the last mule mail route in the United States. The horses wear little USPS logos and probably deserve pension plans. The Havasupai, whose name means people of the blue-green waters, have lived in this canyon for at least 800 years. The travertine waterfalls that pour into Havasu Creek are a shocking, saturated blue-green that looks filter-enhanced until you're standing next to one and realize no Instagram preset exists for this level of impossible color. Havasu Falls, Mooney Falls, Beaver Falls, the kind of beauty that makes you feel personally inadequate. The tribe controls access. You need a permit to visit, and those permits sell out in a frenzy that makes concert ticket drops look calm and rational. People set alarms for 8 a.m. on the release date. The website crashes. Grown adults refresh frantically. For the 208 residents who live there permanently, tribal members, it families who have been in this canyon for generations. It's simply home. There is a school, powered partly by solar. There is a lodge and a cafe. There is the kind of community cohesion that comes from shared isolation. When you're 8 miles from a road, with the walls of the Grand Canyon rising around you, you are deeply structurally committed to the people beside you. The mule brings the mail, the canyon keeps the secrets, and 208 people wake up every morning to waterfalls most of the world can't get a permit to see. Number 4, Whittier, Alaska. Population, approximately 272. Whittier, Alaska has one tunnel connecting it to the outside world. One. It's 2.5 miles long, cuts through Maynard Mountain, and it's a single-lane passage shared by both cars and trains on alternating schedules. Miss your window, and you wait. The tunnel doesn't negotiate. But that's not the actually wild part. The actually wild part is that approximately 80% of Whittier's 272 residents live in the same building. One building. Big Itch Towers, a 14-story concrete monolith built by the U.S. Army in the 1950s, contains apartments, a grocery store, a church, a health clinic, a laundromat, the mayor's office, and most of the social infrastructure of the entire community. There's a connected school building. You can live your entire winter in Whittier without technically going outside. This is not a metaphor. People do this. Whittier gets about 175 inches of rain and snow annually. one of the wettest inhabited places in North America. Willy-Wall wines come screaming off the Chugach Mountains at speeds that make breezy feel insulting as a description. On the worst winter days, Baggage Towers becomes a self-contained village that happens to be inside a building that happens to be inside a mountain pass in Alaska. The Army built Whittier as a strategic deep-water port in World War II, specifically because Prince William Sound doesn't freeze, and the mountains make aerial attack difficult. After the Army left in 1960, the residents, who'd already built their lives there, just stayed. They converted the military infrastructure into civilian life and kept going. Whittier's most discussed Reddit thread, which resurfaces every year, is simply a photo of Baggage Towers with the caption, "This entire building is basically a town." The comments are always the same. "That's horrifying. That's kind of awesome. I would go insane. I would never leave." All 4 responses are correct. The tunnel opens at specific times. Plan accordingly. Number 3. Nightmute, Alaska. Population, approximately 285. The Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta in western Alaska is a place that exists beyond the normal vocabulary for remoteness. It's 35,000 square miles of tundra, wetland, and braided river channels, an area roughly the size of Indiana, and it has no roads connecting it to the outside world. None. Not one. The communities here are accessible by small plane in summer, snowmobile in winter, and boat when the rivers cooperate, which is not always. Nightmute sits on Nelson Island, on the delta's western edge. The name comes from a Yupik word, Negtamute, meaning people of the pointed or hilly land. Its 285 residents are almost entirely Yupik, indigenous to this coast for thousands of years before Alaska was Alaska. The culture here is not a remnant or a relic. It's living. Yupik is spoken. Its traditional subsistence practices, fishing, hunting, berry picking, aren't nostalgia. They're how people eat. But Nightmute also faces realities that are brutal in a way that no lifestyle choice can fully explain away. The Alaska Native villages of the YK Delta consistently appear at or near the top of national rankings for poverty, with some villages reporting unemployment rates above 80%. Heating fuel arrives by barge in summer and costs more per gallon than most Americans can easily comprehend. Food prices in rural Alaska villages are notoriously high. A 2022 study found that basic grocery items in remote Alaska communities cost 2 to 3 times the national average, and yet the land gives back in ways that don't show up in economic statistics. The salmon runs, the moose, the geese, a subsistence lifestyle, practiced well. Provides food, identity, and connection to landscape that no supermarket can replicate. Nightmute's kids grow up knowing the Delta in a way that would seem impossible to anyone raised on pavement. They know which channels flood, which ice is safe, which weather is coming by the color of the sky. That knowledge is worth something that doesn't fit in a spreadsheet. Number 2, Atka, Alaska. Population, approximately 70. Pull out a map, find Alaska. Now find the Aleutian Islands, that curving chain of volcanic rock stretching west into the Pacific like America trying to touch Russia. Go past the first island, go past the second cluster. Keep going, keep going. Now, stop at Atka Island, approximately 1,100 miles southwest of Anchorage. Atka is the westernmost year-round community in the United States. 70 people live here on an island that the Pacific Ocean treats as a personal project. The weather is phenomenal in its violence. Low-pressure systems spin off the Aleutians so frequently that meteorologists call the region the birthplace of storms. Wind, rain, fog, then more wind. The Aleutians see roughly 300 cloudy days per year. The sun, when it appears, feels less like a celestial body and more like an apology. There's no airport with regular commercial service. You take an Alaska Airlines flight to the airstrip that operates on a schedule best described as weather permitting, which in the Aleutians means maybe. The trip from Anchorage to Atka is roughly the same distance as flying from New York to Miami, except Miami does not have active volcanoes, and Miami's airport is not regularly socked in by horizontal fog. The Aitkan-Unagan people, Aleut, have lived on these islands for over 9,000 years. They survived contact with Russian fur traders in the 18th century, which was catastrophic. They survived forced evacuation during World War II when the Japanese occupied nearby Kiska Island. The U.S. military burned Atka to prevent Japanese use of it. After the war, the Atkins returned and rebuilt. They came back to a burned village on a storm-racked volcanic island at the end of the known American world, and they rebuilt. That fact alone should recalibrate whatever you think isolation means. Number 1, Adak, Alaska. Population, approximately 82. Here is where isolation stops being a lifestyle choice and starts being a statement about human nature itself. Adak Island sits at roughly 51 degrees north latitude in the central Aleutian chain, 1,200 miles southwest of Anchorage. At its peak during the Cold War, it was home to 6,000 U.S. Navy personnel and their families, a full military city at the edge of the North Pacific, bristling with radar installations, submarines, and the infrastructure of America's watch on the Soviet fleet. There were schools, bowling alleys, a cinema, a golf course. The 18-hole golf course on Adak Island is now widely considered one of the most remarkable abandoned places in America. 9 holes are still semi-playable. The other 9 are being reclaimed by tundra grass and nesting birds. It is the world's most remote golf course, and it belongs to the Eagles now. The Navy left in 1997. The city of 6,000 became, in a matter of years, a vast haunted infrastructure with 82 people rattling around inside it. Adak has a grocery store, the westernmost grocery store in the United States. And it stocks what it can, though prices are eye-watering. It has a school, a medical clinic, a harbor, an airport with a runway long enough to land a 747. All of this for 82 people. The ratio of infrastructure to population is somewhere between generous and surreal. Who lives in Adak now? Largely Aleut families, fishermen, and people connected to the Adak seafood processing operation, which is the economic engine keeping the lights on. The waters around the Aleutians are some of the most productive fishing grounds in the world. King crab, Pacific cod, pollock, and Adak sits at the center of it. The isolation that makes Adak impractical for most human activities makes it ideal for fishing operations that need deep water access far from the continent. But then, there are the others. The ones who just came to Adak and stayed. Drawn by something that's hard to articulate and easy to understand, if you've ever stood somewhere that the wind is so strong and the sky is so enormous, and the human footprint is so thin that you feel briefly and terrifyingly like a species that hasn't quite earned its place on the planet yet. Walk through the abandoned naval housing in Adak, and the windows still have curtains. The streets still have names. There's a church. The golf course fairways are still visible under the encroaching tundra if you know where to look. Adak is not dead. But it's not alive in any way that our usual metrics for aliveness recognize. The 82 people who call Adak home are living proof that isolation is not a condition that humans suffer. For some of us, for the Atkins, the Whittierites, the Elsie Eilers, and the Terlingua artists, and the chicken, Alaska bartenders, isolation is a preference so deep it might actually be a personality type. The scientific term, I believe, is done with it. In a world that grows louder, faster, more connected, and more claustrophobic every year, there are 82 Americans on a volcanic island at the edge of the Pacific, watching imperial eagles ride thermals over an abandoned Cold War golf course, eating pollock they caught themselves, and watching storms the size of European countries roll in off the North Pacific. You call that isolated. They call it home. And somewhere deep in the part of your brain that still remembers what silence feels like, you almost understand. So there it is. 12 towns that America forgot, or that decided, loudly and with conviction, to forget America right back. From Elsie Eiler running a bar for a customer base of 1, to 82 people rattling around a Cold War ghost city at the edge of the Pacific, what these places share isn't failure. It's not poverty or stubbornness or inability to function in normal society. Though, if that's what you need it to be, the comment section's yours. What they share is a refusal to accept that a life needs to be loud, crowded, convenient, or witnessed to count. Adak has 82 people, and abandoned bowling alleys and eagles on a golf course. Monowai has 1 woman and 5,000 books, and a light she keeps burning. Anu Supai has waterfalls so blue your eyes don't believe them, delivered by mule. None of these places need your permission to exist. They're out there right now. The wind coming, the salmon running, the tunnel opening on schedule. Whether you know about them or not. Hit that like button if this made you want to disappear somewhere beautiful and terrible. Subscribe because next time, we're taking this global, the most isolated towns on Earth, and at least one of them makes Adak look like Times Square. Drop in the comments. Which one of these would you actually survive? Be honest. I'm guessing Tortilla Flat, because at least there's a bar. Stay curious. The good stuff is always further off the map than you think.